All right. Hi, everyone. Can I be heard? If yes, please unmute and let me know.
I can hear you.
Sure. Thanks for the feedback. I think we can get started because our time is up. Yeah. So I welcome you all to CCRE's HPC Skills Research Symposium. Kindly let us know in the chat where you are joining us from. We'll be glad to know that. So in case you are wondering what CCRE is, CCRE is Center for Computational Research and Education. It's a program designed to build practical computing skills and strengthen the computational research capacity in Africa. So you can learn more about this program on our YouTube channel at Center for Computational Research and Education. And also, I want to use this opportunity to acknowledge our excellent core team who are working day in, day out to make sure our activities and programs are successful and fruitful. I'm Doreen Afful, and I will be the facilitator for today's session. We are blessed to have two wonderful speakers with us today, and they will tell us about their interesting research areas. And we also have the opportunity to ask them questions after their presentation. And also feel free to leave your questions in the chat while they present. Yeah. So I'll just tell us about our first speaker and we'll get right into it. So our first speaker is a PhD candidate in mechanical engineering at Carnegie Mellon University, where her research focuses on accelerating and improving the engineering design process through AI. Her work sits at the intersection of machine learning and simulation, with a particular emphasis on making simulation workflows faster, more interpretable, and more accessible. She has leveraged wafer-scale computing platforms, including the Cerebras WSE, to develop physics-aware foundation models and neural compression methods for large-scale simulation data. Her work has been published in leading venues such as the ASME Journal for Mechanical Design and the ACM IEEE Supercomputing Conference, and includes collaborations with industry partners such as NICIS. Here to speak about physics-aware AI at scale, guys, we have Jessica Ezemba. Hi, Jessica.
Hi.
Well, it's nice to have you today. Please tell us about your research, and you have 15 minutes for that. We can't wait to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for the introduction. I have a few slides that I'll be using to also go over kind of what the research that I'm working on is. If you can confirm if you can see my slides.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, awesome. All right. So yeah, I would get right into it since I was already introduced. A little bit about my research. Like you mentioned, it's simulation focused, with the specific flair of running large-scale simulations and finding ways to go about with the problems of them. And I'll only be talking on 2 problems in this presentation, but there's a whole lot more. So happy to take questions if anyone has anything. So I like to introduce this part of my work in a general scope of where I started out. So I come from the engineering field, which is engineering design processes. So that's how you go from customer requirements, like I want a chair, all the way to the physical prototype being made and sold. And where I live in this field is the engineering validation phase, where you haven't yet physically manufactured it, but you want to run engineering simulations to ensure that it will work, or in the example of the chair, it would hold up the weight that you are designing it for. And this is done majorly through simulations, not prior to physical manufacturing. So there's a lot of problems with this stage, but the new phase that is coming out that's leading to additional questions is this whole field of scientific machine learning, where we have a lot of these engineering simulation tools, and these tools have been used for a long time. And now we have machine learning as well. So there's people that are trying to combine the two fields for scientific machine learning. And it can really speed up the process of understanding simulations. So traditionally, expert will have to come and look at the simulations to understand what's going on. But what if LLM or an agent was able to do that? You could speed up the process, broaden accessibility for using these tools, and also discover additional things. So that's kind of where the field is going in, but there's some limitations with that field. So what you're looking at here is some research out of Johns Hopkins. It's a lot of simulations that do a lot of different things. I think the first picture is like the aorta during the heart pumping, what's being flowed inside is blood. You can see like a butterfly flying, and that is a human being kicking the dolphin kick for a swim. So these kind of physics simulation, you can simulate anything. So that's the whole point of this. But the problem is, if you want to really use a machine learning algorithm to learn what's going on in these simulations, you need to be able to ingest it in a way that can be used in that pipeline. So the huge problem with this, if you haven't guessed already from the title slide, is a lot of these simulations are very complex. They're very large. They can easily exceed petabytes of data. So that's one more than terabytes of data. And that's just one simulation. So if you want to train a machine learning model, you need a lot of data. If one data point already exceeds a petabyte, you can't train it in any end-to-end fashion. So there's been a lot of research trying to solve this problem, and that's where this presentation is going to be focusing on. So for example, a paper came out and introduced like a really well cleaned up data set that goes into all sorts of simulations. There's like fluid flow, there's supernovas in there, there's biological activation, like this here is cells propagating through a media. There's a supernova over here from astrophysics. So there's a lot of simulations here, and they did pretty good work for getting it in an accessible size. But even this data is still 15 terabytes of data. So what can we do? There's two paradigms that I'm going to be introducing in this presentation. That's where some of the research that I've been doing has been focused on, which is, since we know the simulations are very large, can we reduce them into a different form and then use that? And a very easy way of doing that is to use images. Images are a compressed form. They are not on the other terabytes, definitely. I think some of the high resolution images will get you to megabytes, maybe. So can you capture enough information in an image that you can use to learn the same things? We will see that that's not that easy, but that was the idea for that. And the second paradigm is using the raw data. We have all this data for each of the points in this simulation. There's values such as pressure, velocity, over n number of steps. So can we use all that data, the raw data, compress it in a very short, succinct box, and then when we need it, we will just uncompress it in real time. So that was the idea. And I'll be presenting briefly on both of these, and then happy to take questions if any specific situations or specific questions on the implementations come up. So I will introduce this as a idea for the reduced compression that I was talking about, or the reduced representation. People have done this for different types of modalities. So for example, you can take speech and turn it into an image, and that's called a spectrogram. And then you can use this image to learn this is when someone is speaking, this is when someone is breathing, this is when someone is speaking, like a classification model. But you're not using the raw large audio data that goes on for hours and hours. You're just using this image. So that's something that has been done. So we wanted to see if we could do that for simulation data itself. So in order to do that, this was a project out of ByteBoost. I was working with a great collaborator, James, also on this call. And the work that we put out there was, can we take individual frames of simulations, same way that you converted an image or speech to an image, can we convert this simulation videos to images and use that to train a machine learning model? There's a lot of back end that went into this for like, how do we set this up? How do we get it working? But this is the general idea. You take the videos, you split them frame by frame. So that's what you're seeing here from the raw simulation trajectories for n number of steps. You pre-process them so they're all around the same size. They're all around the same distribution when it comes to like machine learning situations. And then you train a vision transformer, which is a model that's been well known to be able to predict or any end task for machine learning. In this case, we were doing a lot of different end tasks. We were trying to determine where does this simulation end up, like what bucket is it? And then the second one was, can we predict the next time step? And then, what does that look like from a visualization of this embedding space for the machine learning model? I will skip ahead to the results just to kind of see what the embedding space that I was talking about. Something called principal component analysis of or TSNE, if you're familiar with that. But it's just a way to take these large layers of the neural network and compress them into 2 dimensions so that we can visualize it on the screen. What you're looking at here is comparisons with general purpose models, and then the model we trained is in the first column. And what you're looking at here is how different are they from the 2 columns, the last 2 columns. And we saw that the model that we trained is very different. And once you put it in numbers, our model, which is the top row, did better performance than the other general purpose models. And from an HPC or high performance computing, it took way less time than the other models that were used to train the model. So that was the first work. And if we go into like the implicit, like how can we take the raw data and compress it? Again, this is not something that's new. It's been used in multiple different domains. Like this is like showing CT, MRI images, like they have multiple layers, they have super high resolution, but we would need to be able to get at a specific square in a specific large image. So you need to be able to zoom and zoom and zoom. So they use something to compress the data so that you can easily store it and then uncompress it when you need to use it. So it's not new, and we wanted to apply this again to simulation. So for example, if you have the original simulation data, you compress it, and then when you want to use it, you uncompress it. There's some limitations to this because you can destroy the underlying physics. But if this is trained well, you could recover the exact simulation with some threshold error. Again, I'll walk through this in general. The idea, again, we're taking the simulation data. The difference now is we're not looking at images, we're looking at the raw coordinates. So at each point, there's the X, Y, Z, there's the time, there's the pressure velocity for fluid flow, for any sort of like structural analysis, there might be displacement, for example. So these are the raw physics data itself that are just stored in tensors or in like large tables and matrices. You use that raw data to train a simple multi-layer perception or neural function, and you're learning the correlations between the inputs and the outputs, and the weights of this MLP or the multi-layer perception is what's actually going to be used to decompress the data. So you train this enough time to get to a low loss, and then at the point of inference or when you actually want to use it, you can query a specific time, uncompress it, and get the full matrix for that specific point, which is what you want for engineering, for simulation data that's very large. I'll skip over to the results for what that looked like. What you're looking at in this table is how well we did in compressing the data. We did pretty well. We went through different types of simulations, like you can see in the domain on the column, on the first column. And we went from like the largest was about 2 terabytes to 37 megabytes. That's over 25,000x in compression. And that's something that you can easily store in any given computer, even edge computing or small IoT devices. And the signal to noise ratio and the errors were also pretty low. So that's something that you can keep improving as you increase the size of your multi-layer perception. Obviously, it depends on the type of simulations. More complex simulations, like the astrophysics one, had higher losses, but relatively simpler simulations like this had lower losses associated with it. So that's kind of the idea. And when it comes to the high performance computing, again, using this Cerebras C3, which is a high CXS, different paradigm than like a GPU that you would see, for example, the H100s, we're able to train this entire thing from end to end in about a couple hours. So that means you can keep iterating on this and training and reducing this data so that it can be stored in a way that can be used for downstream machine learning applications, like the next time step prediction that we were talking about. So yeah, those are the two paradigms that this presentation goes over. And I also want to acknowledge where the support for this came from. We have the Pittsburgh Supercomputing, Carnegie Mellon at Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So that's where a lot of this work was run through, and through the ByteBoost program, like I mentioned, was also a huge part of this as well. But I am happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Thank you, Jessica, for that wonderful presentation. Well done. At this point, we'll open up for questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So to all present on this call, please bring out your questions. Jessica is ever willing to answer them. Okay, so I can go first. I want to know the interesting part of your job or your research. What's the most interesting part of it?
Yeah, I think the most interesting part in the research is being able to go from I have an idea to actually implementing and testing it. So for the second project that I was talking about, it was just a thought that we have this problem because the simulations are very large. How can we fix that? And you can think of or brainstorm a bunch of things, and then you can run it end to end, like create a very small test, see if it actually works before you scale it up. So there's just a lot of things that you can try, especially with compute getting better. You can do it quicker and get your answers faster if this is even viable or not, which I think was not the case when I first started out, when compute wasn't that good. So that's what I find most interesting.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. In case you have a question, you can just raise your hand. We'll call you and you would ask.
There's a question in the chat.
In the chat. Thanks for prompting me. Okay.
Yeah, I can see the chat.
Sure. So the question is, I understand the need for accuracy in simulation. How do you balance the accuracy needed versus the speed the compression brings?
Yeah, definitely. That's a good question. I think where you want to start out with that is what the purpose of simulation is to begin with. So simulation is a model, right? And I think the popular saying is all models are wrong, some are useful. So the engineering simulations, the things that we're simulating in and of themselves are or can be inaccurate. What is important and why we still do engineering simulations is that it's faster than trying to run it in real time. And some things you can't even run physically. But if you keep running it to some threshold, is what the traditional simulation engines do, you can have a guarantee of at least the critical parts are being simulated, maybe not everything. And that kind of mindset is what I want to bring to this reconstruction. So for example, for this astrophysics that we're looking at here, there's some critical parts here that show like gases being left off from this jet stream of like fluid particles, and that's not captured at all in the reconstruction of the model. Now, that's important, or that could be very important. I'm definitely not an astrophysicist, but being able to capture after reconstruction or decompression, those critical areas are something that's important. The less critical areas, like the wake that's being shown here, maybe not so important. And right now it gets all of that pretty correctly. So it's just being able to balance, if you can train this model in a way that the critical areas that you're interested in don't get lost, then this is of value, even though, you will be losing some information. It's not possible to go through this level of compression without losing information. It's just, can we keep the things that are most important?
All right, that's nice. Altman, are you good? Oh, I think I see your thank you. Sure. Thanks for the
Yeah,
feedback.
yeah, no problem.
Sure. Any more questions, comments? I think we'll wait for the next 30 seconds. If nothing comes up, then we'll move on to our next speaker. So please
Yeah.
make good use of this 30 seconds. If you have any question, please bring it up now.
I mean, yeah, and if there's no questions, I can just quickly show like a work that I think might be of interest to this field as well. But
Okay.
we're trying to use like LLM agents to design aircrafts. So that's a huge question on if anyone will ever get on a plane that's designed by LLM or ChatGPT. But it is something that we're testing. Given like parameters, can we get an agent that's able to build a plane? And what we're seeing with this is that the baseline, which is this model, if you use a traditional gradient-based optimizer, is very conservative and it produces good results, but you can get a slew of different designs if you use LLM agents that are still physically valid from the simulation perspective, but something that wouldn't have traditionally been thought of by like engineering designers. So that's just something to put out there. The field is moving pretty quickly, so I think it's a good time to start learning this.
Oh, that's amazing. I think there's a comment here. Says
Yeah,
building a plane is not the part I'm most concerned about if I am flying on a plane built by AI.
yeah, definitely.
That's nice. Any more comments, questions? Is Jessica free to go?
And if you have any other questions, feel free to contact me. This is my email, and my website is just my first name, last name.com, and then there's a contact form on that as well.
Sure. Altman says thank you.
All right, you're
That
welcome.
was very interesting. Thank you. Yeah, and want to thank you. I'm assuming there are no more questions because I haven't seen any in the chat. Yeah, so I want to say thank you. Thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing your research with us. And we hope to connect in the future. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. We would quickly move on to the second part of our symposium. So I'll tell you quickly about our second speaker and we can get started. Our second speaker serves as a senior technologist within the research division of South Africa's National Integrated Cyber Infrastructure System. That's the NICIS. He holds a master's degree in computer science from Georgia Tech. He leverages his expertise to spearhead the development of an HPC-related curriculum for South African and regional universities. He contributes to educational initiatives in Africa and globally, including the establishment of the world's first at-scale downloadable HPC training cluster, among many other projects. In recognition of his contributions, he was nominated for South Africa's National Science Diplomacy Award and was honored with the 2024 HPC World Reader's Choice Award for Outstanding Leadership in HPC, celebrating his efforts in building an international community for emerging HPC centers. He currently leads the HPC Ecosystems Project, which he will be telling us about soon. So would at this point welcome Bryan Johnston to take us through the second part. Hi, Bryan.
Hello. I'm going to try with my camera. Good evening, everyone, or I guess good morning, depending where you are.
Yeah, it's afternoon here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
I'm starting the slideshow. Just I need to get Teams to show it.
Sure. Please, you have 15 minutes to walk us through your. Yeah.
No problem. Can you see the slides now?
Yeah.
All right. Let me just get a laser pointer. Cool. So hi, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. I'm going to share very briefly on the HPC Ecosystems Project, which is a project that I lead at the Center for High Performance Computing, which is a part of the CSIR. So maybe a little bit about me to start. I am formerly a system administrator for HPC's, High Performance Computing, and I was based at a university in South Africa. But then I became an HPC user when I did my graduate studies at Georgia Tech, doing my master's in computer science. And I've been leading the HPC Ecosystems Project for 10 years. In fact, my 10-year anniversary is next week, and at the CSIR as well. And then I also partner with CERN through the ALICE experiment, but I'm also trying to scale it out to the ATLAS experiment, which is much more data intensive and relative to the square kilometer array. And I am Bryan with a Y. I was born with 2 eyes, and my parents decided I didn't need a third. I'm based in Cape Town in South Africa. And for anyone on the call, I don't think this is relevant, but South Africa is the most practical name of any country in the world. And we're based at the southern tip of Africa. And I work at the Center for High Performance Computing, which is the national supercomputing facility in South Africa. And our primary audience that we service are 3 regions: the South African local institutes, in the square kilometer array partner countries, which are highlighted on the left, and you can see a little country over there, which is Ghana, which I think this program is part of a training program you're launching in Ghana. And then on the right is the Southern African community. And there is a lot of overlap between the 2 regions. The slides are being shared, so I won't talk about this, but there's a link to a paper that some of us wrote describing the first 10 years of this project. But I think to ground the project and where it started from, one of our mandates at the CSIR and at the NICIS cyber infrastructure system is to develop and support necessary high-performance computing education and advocacy in the country and the SADC region. But you'll see through the slides that we've actually extended this far beyond just those regions. Now it's Africa, and in some concepts also globally. So if I had to summarize the project in one slide, we support the high-performance computing community in South Africa, Southern Africa, and the square kilometer array partner countries. But we do a lot more than just support them. We actually have extended this to develop, engage, and align the broader African HPC community. We can't bridge the gap between the global South and the global North through funding because we just don't have enough. So we have to align as an African continent with HPC, in my opinion. The main purpose of the project is to repurpose and distribute decommissioned tier 1 systems into entry-level systems for distribution in Africa. But that on its own would just be essentially a glorified e-waste distribution program. So we also recognize there's sustainability behind this. So we have a lot of high-performance computing technical training that we provide for our community. And through our journey, we've realized as well that a lot of the material that's available, or the supporting software that we use, or even the material we use for training, is very nuanced for countries that have a lot of resources and are not really suited for resource-constrained environments. So we have developed some solutions and tools to enhance our training and make scientific computing more accessible. And I'll talk a bit about that later. Very briefly, our project follows a model of a readiness phase, an implementation phase, and an operations phase. So all the sites that I talk about will be at one of these 3 stages of their journey. But to go to the origin story of the project now, when the square kilometer array 10, 15 years ago was more a dream than a reality, they were anticipating that when it was fully deployed, it would be generating effectively the amount of global internet traffic per day that needed to be stored. And to mirror the internet every day would be impractical. And we need to process that data, clean the data, compress the data, and then store the data. So that would require exascale computing, which was effectively like we're trying to land on the moon, but we need to be colonizing Mars. That was kind of the gap between the technologies. So we needed to develop this expertise in Africa and South Africa to facilitate the square kilometer array, but we didn't even have platforms to train on. So that was the problem. The solution came at a very interesting point because supercomputers traditionally, they live fast and they retire young. And you can use that phrase, I made it up. It's a good one. But the question really was, what happens to these systems when they retire? Typically in the global north, they'd recycle the components if they could, or they would mothball the systems in a warehouse. The question was, are these systems actually still useful if they've lived for such a short period of time before they get shut down? And the answer was right in front of us. The Ranger system was the first system that was used in this project. And you can see when it was launched on debut, it was number 7 in the world of measured computers. And when they shut it down 4 years later, it was ranked as the 50th fastest supercomputer on the planet when they switched it off. So surely that made it still a very useful system. So our director at the time, Dr. Happy Sitole, and the director of the Texas Advanced Computing Center, Dan Stanzioni, agreed that obtaining forgiveness is probably an easier objective than trying to get permission to ship this hardware to South Africa. So they put the Ranger equipment on a ship and brought it to Cape Town, and it was distributed in 2014 to some local sites in South Africa as part of human capital development, a long-term planning for square kilometer array, but also to develop that pipeline through initiatives called the Student Cluster Competition. And we had 5 sites in 2014. A few years later, we'd expanded it to 10 sites across Southern Africa with the square kilometer array partner countries. So the Ranger project had shown that there was a model we could follow to distribute hardware. Around that time, the forgiveness was received because the story was a good one. And we started receiving other offers of hardware from around the world. And we renamed the pilot Ranger project into what is called now the HPC Ecosystems Project. And around that time, 2018 to 2020, I realized we have this sustainable pipeline of hardware now. We need to be growing this community. It was very impractical for me on my own to manage the community through WhatsApp and things. So we started to build this community that could share knowledge and resources with one another and just get that awareness out there. Jump ahead to 10 years later, more or less. This is the map at the moment. We've deployed, in fact, this map is outdated. This is now, we've deployed to more than 36 sites. And what's nice is that many sites share the same hardware, which makes training and support much easier. And the bottom right is just a map of some of my travel over those past 10 years, showing the global nature of this project. It's not just something we do in Africa, but we're partnering with people in Europe and the US as well. And the numbers look good, but these systems are all in different stages of those 3 phases I spoke about. Some are not even ready. So I would say the conversion ratio is about 60% of this number in terms of some practical application being done with the systems. Through this process, we have been asked to share what we can do the right way. But all I can say is I can tell you what not to do, because we haven't perfected this ourselves. But some of the lessons we've learned is if something is free, someone in Africa is going to want to take it. Even if they can't spell HPC, they'll take it. And again, you can use that phrase, and I have proof that I made that phrase up, even though people seem to have taken it and used it elsewhere. HPC is a fast product, but we don't need to rush. I think the tendency is to grab the first opportunity you can for cyber infrastructure, and that's not necessarily the case. You could deploy a system prematurely, it could fall over, or it could be hacked, and then you lose all your support. No one trusts your system, and then it's all about rebuilding your reputation to get people to use that system. So don't rush it, do it methodically and carefully. And another myth is that training is a silver bullet. Do one set of training, and then you know everything. What's important about HPC is that it requires niche technical skills. This is not enterprise IT. You can't come from an enterprise IT background, being a CIO, and think that you know how to run an HPC center. It's a transition into a scientific computing mindset that you need to accept, you need to go through. And likewise, that is relevant to the HPC users. If you have a site that has no users, or people that think they can just throw their standard applications in HPC, it's not going to necessarily run faster or better. And you need to establish those users, because otherwise you just have an expensive doorstop. And resist the temptation that an HPC will solve all your problems. That is also not always the case. The application has to fit it. And our first speaker shared all those applications that fit with an HPC, but there are some that don't. So I think I've used 10 minutes, so 5 minutes left. I'm not going to talk about the slide so much, but I'm going to go on to the next part, which is the human capital development. You've heard that expression, you can give a man a fish and feed them for a day, or give a person a fish. And then you can also teach them to fish and they'll be fed for a lifetime. The challenge is when we teach people to fish, they end up fishing in other people's ponds. What I mean by that is we skill people up, then they get snatched up by Amazon or Google, or the mainstream fintech companies, and we lose that staff. For us to retrain new people every time is an unsustainable model. Of course, it does give a testament to the fact that our training is effective, but it's not sustainable for us to do that. So from 2020 onwards, we started to focus on enabling the community to be autonomous. The traditional model we had was to deploy hardware once you've done the site assessment and an engagement, go back to the site to do the training and have the system running. That can't happen. We can't keep going back to sites to do training. So we developed online training. At the time, it was and I think it still is, the first of its kind training platform online that you deploy to your local computer. You don't need to practice an HPC skill set using a cloud resource or using an enterprise or production system. You can run it all on your local computer. And it's scalable, accessible, and on demand. So what we found is we managed to deploy 36 systems to 11 countries over the 10 years and train 1,000 people through 24,000 training hours through 35 formal training workshops, which are all very fantastic numbers. But the actual translation to reality is not always as impressive as this. We do have a global interest in our training. A window of 12 months has shown the global adoption of our training platform. And even in the workshops themselves, we get about 1/6 female participation. I mean, it varies, right? But also an interesting trend is that a lot of the people are from the US, and they're the second largest group. It shows that there's relevance seen in what we've been developing, which is a spin-off from us focusing on South Africa and resource-constrained environments. And we've released a paper about that as well. Cloud is its purpose, of course, but I think when you have resource constraints, sometimes you don't have luxury of a cloud. And I'm not criticizing other methods, but there's some value in what we've done here. Training on a HPC system that you have on your laptop while in flight to another destination is not something you can necessarily do on a cloud or on a cluster. One of the biggest highlights is that our community, our virtual community, has expanded to reach now more. This is outdated now. We've got 540 people from 5 continents that are in our workspace. And that is testament to the fact that people identify with what we're doing, and they see value in it, and they want to contribute. I don't miss Australia not being there, but Antarctica would be a highlight if someone from Antarctica decided to sign up. Some other highlights, a certain president from a certain Ghanaian country has, we've met the president, deployed a system there and launched it with him. We've engaged with the president of Botswana, and internationally, we've received some recognition, which is quite, encouraging. The HPC Wire Awards, to my knowledge, I think South Africa had received 1 prior to this, which was the launch of our petaflop scale system. And then since then, the Ecosystems Project has received 3 such awards. And, they use terms like changing the face of HPC in Africa. And I think that's a really strong incentive and encouragement for what we're doing. And it's a community thing. So you can see in this picture here, these are folks from the US and South Africa and Africa that really are proud of what we're achieving, but it's because it's a community that we can get those results. And in 2024, we received another 2, Elizabeth won for her project, and then of course, another a recognition of our project for me. We also publish a lot of research papers through undergraduates that are involved in our program. And that is especially important because, peer-reviewed journals at international conferences think that what we're doing contributes to the global knowledge base. And that as well, for me, is a highlight. We have also launched a discovery survey to see what infrastructure exists in Africa so that we can better align with one another, but also collaborate and plan. We don't need to reinvent the wheel every time. Perhaps there's resources out there that can be used for initiatives like a GPU center. So we don't need to always reinvent the wheel. What we found through that, and there's findings in a paper that we're presenting at a conference next month, is that there are a lot more people out there than we realized. And even the national governments aren't aware of those sites that exist. I have just run out of time. I hope I can go for another minute or two, but I'm almost done. Just shut me down if I need to stop. I'm not very good at high performance presentations. So we've also got a partnership with a nonprofit organization in the US, which we've been running for about 10 years, which has got sustainable momentum now, where we raise about $5,000 or $6,000 per person, and we get on average between 8 and 12 people from Africa to attend the flagship conference in the United States. And that's a snapshot of the attendance of like 12,000 people, because we need to have our voice at the table and people need to be exposed to the broader community. So we can also control the narrative around high performance computing development and resource deployments. And it's so favorably met at this point that last year I was able to send a single email and I secured almost $30,000 funding to bring 4 people to the US and present at the conference. And that's only from sustained relationship building. I won't go into the focus areas here, but in conclusion, this project is a milestone because of so many people. And it's the project team back in South Africa, our community partners and affiliates around the world, the Texas Advanced Computing Center, University of Cambridge has supplied hardware, STEMTrek is our NPO with Elizabeth Leak that's been very active in supporting us financially to get people to these conferences. Of course, our European partners, EPCC and Prace, the Open HPC Consortium, where we contribute towards their software stack development, and my alma mater, Georgia Tech. These folks are active on our Slack. I had an undergraduate student ask a random question because they were stuck with something, and they had no idea that they were being supported by one of the leading experts in that technology who had a direct Slack chat with them and helped them through their process. And they had no clue they were getting access to someone that normally would not be someone you could just talk to on a Slack. So there's a link to our project there, but I'll end with this slide. You can print this out, cut it out, and place it on your refrigerator if you ever want to get in touch with me to talk more about the project, or if perhaps, hopefully, you want to join our Slack community. So sorry about that. I went over time, but thank you for the extra minutes.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you, Bryan.